Good evening and welcome to tonight's Meadville Tribune Forum with the candidates running for Meadville Mayor as well as Meadville City Council. We welcome you here in the audience at Meadville's Active Aging Center as well as those watching on Armstrong Cable and those listening on Cool 101.7 FM. I'm Keith Gushard, one of the Tribune's reporters, and with me is Rick Green, who's the editor of the paper. Before we start, I'm going to ask everyone to please take a moment to turn off any cell phone they may have with them so we don't have a distraction during the forum tonight. Thank you very much. We appreciate the candidates appearing here this evening to be questioned about important issues facing the city of Meadville. With us this evening are the mayoral candidates, Democrat Leroy Stearns and Republican John Battaglia. Also with us are the candidates for Meadville City Council who will be appearing on the ballot, Democrat Sean Donahue and Herb Reedy, and Republican Jim Roa. And we've invited those candidates together because under Meadville's council manager form of government, the mayor is a voting member of the 5-seat city council. We're going to allow each candidate up to a 2-minute introduction of themselves, and then we'll begin questioning of the candidates. Each of the candidates will have up to 2 minutes to answer the question. We've drawn lots ahead of time to see who goes first with the introduction, and then we'll begin questioning with that same person, then alternate. They're seated left to right in the order we drew, 1 through 5. Again, Mr. Stearns, Mr. Donahue, Mr. Reedy, Mr. Roa, and Mr. Battaglia. Again, thank you all for appearing tonight. I'm going to turn it over to Rick, and he'll start off with our introduction, with Mayor Stearns. You have 2 minutes.
Good evening. I want to thank you for allowing the candidates to be here this evening, especially the Meadville Tribune, Armstrong, and 101.7. Gives the voters and the residents of the city of Meadville an opportunity to hear what we have to offer as an elected officials. I've had the great opportunity to serve on Meadville City Council since 1997. That's 5 consecutive 5-term. At the end of this year, it'll be 20 years service to the community, and I just want to thank the community and the voters for allowing me to serve the city of Meadville. It's been an honor. I have served mayor since January of 2016, and when I began to start as mayor, I made the comment, let's make Meadville fun again. And in doing so, a lot of things have happened since January of 16. We've had a lot of local groups getting involved. We have Thankful Thursday that works very hard to keep Meadville cleaned up, and they volunteer their time along with neighborhood centers. And there are so many organizations out there, Grow Meadville, with their planning around the city of Meadville, allowing the residents just to walk along and grab a tomato or some kind of fruit to eat or vegetable. So I'm really proud of Meadville, and I want to just thank the voters for giving me the opportunity to serve for 20 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Donahue, you're next. You have up to 2 minutes.
Okay, I'd like to thank the Tribune. I'd like to thank Armstrong and Cool 101 for holding this event. I was elected to council in 2013, and I'm a Meadville resident, lifelong Meadville resident. I graduated high school from MASH in 1985, and I went to Barron, and I have a business economics degree from '89. And I've lived here my whole life. I married a Meadville girl too. We've been married for 22 years, and we have 2 sons, and Sean and Ryan. I'm a tool maker. I own my own tool shop, and I also have rental properties in the area, in Meadville and Vernon and West Mead. I really enjoy being on council. I've seen progress and things that I think are important to me that have changed, and I see how we're working together. And I'd like to stay on council and continue my work. There's things that I think we could keep doing.
Thank you. Mr. Reedy?
As the new guy in local politics, I'd like to introduce myself. My name's Herb Reedy. I grew up the son of a World War II vet and a proud hillbilly mother. My older siblings on my dad's side work for NASA, ABC, ESPN, in medicine and law. On my mom's side, they work in factories, plastics, welding, and on farms. At 5, I had a computer, and my parents decided they wanted to spend summers in Erie and winters in Las Vegas. By 10, I was a straight A student, and we were talking about possibly going to high school early. Then at 11, my dad and I were mugged at the Las Vegas ATM. My testimony put the person away. A year later, despite help from Congressman Tom Ridge, my father passed away when I was 12 at the VA hospital in Erie. My mom and I went into a spiral. I quit school when I was 14. And when I was 15, we were homeless in Vegas for a month. And at another point, we went a year in Tidioute without running water and just an extension cord for electricity. Then we moved to Meadville. In Meadville, I was impressed by the Most Honest award that Reader's Digest gave for the dropped wallet test. I worked full time, got my GED, and opened a computer store in the downtown mall. And you were there for me then. I started attending Edinburgh, but by the second year, my daughters were on the way. They were in the NICU for a month, but I quickly had a Meadville address again by the time they were 6 months old, and you were there for me then. I was hired by a .com in Florida, and then a teddy bear company in Gettysburg. And then my mother and late father-in-law began having health issues, and I wanted the girls near them, and you were there for me then. Since then, I've gone through a divorce. I've got custody of the girls. I bought a house. I've got engaged and had another son. And I'd like to be there for you. So even though my life might not be as
Mr. Reedy, I'm sorry.
lifelong,
The 2 minutes.
I'd like your vote.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thanks to everybody for being here. Thanks to the Tribune for sponsoring this event. Thanks to Cool 101 and Armstrong for broadcasting it. We're grateful you took the time and had the interest to attend. My name's Jim Roa. I've lived in Meadville for 2 centuries, all of this one and half of the last. During that time, I've served 2 full terms on Meadville City Council. I was deputy mayor both terms. Tonight, I'm asking you for the privilege and the opportunity to serve you again as your councilman. I graduated from Allegheny College. I pursued additional studies at Edinburgh, West Virginia University, Pitt, and Penn State Barron. I've earned professional licensing as a real estate broker, a certified appraiser, and a real estate instructor. I taught adult education at Penn State, Villa Maria, and Gannon. For the last 19 years, I've occasionally written opinion columns as guest of the Meadville Tribune. I bring to the table a comprehensive background in business, finance, industry, and real estate. If elected, I'll listen to your concerns and opinions. I'll attend meetings regularly. I'll be prepared to discuss and act on the issues facing our community. That's what you deserve. Opportunity has drawn all of us here. We all came from somewhere else, us or our ancestors. Old business models have faded into history, but new ones have taken their place, and that's thanks to a diverse, dynamic, and innovative pool of talent in our community. The policies enacted by City Council directly affect the economic viability and the financial stability of the community, and to a certain extent, they determine whether that dynamic exchange of talent will continue or not. I've said before, politics is not about doing the easy thing, it's about doing the necessary things, and if elected, that's what I'll do.
Mr. Roa, we have to cut you off at 2 minutes. Mr. Pataglia?
Thanks for the trip to the Tribune and Cool 101 and the cable station, Armstrong, for having this forum. And thank you, everybody who came tonight to watch us. I'm John Battaglia, and I'm the second most senior person on council after Leroy Stearns. I've been on council since 2010. Before that, I was elected to 1 term on the Crawford Central School Board in the 80s. My background is in education. I was a teacher for 39 years, and one other thing I did is I built new homes for a long time. I think I have like 60 new homes in the county here, so that's what I'm doing now. This city, I've been around for a long time. I've seen it come from an industrial city before the the big Talon and Viscos moved out, we went through some really bad times in the city. You know, it was a big shift. But now, in the summer, there's something going on almost every weekend, and it's a kind of a fun place to live. There's always activities, and I think it's sort of like, not exactly a renaissance, but the city is, I think, getting to be a nice place to live again. Okay, thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Again, we'll start the questioning with Mr. Stearns, and first question is to him. Rick?
Thanks again, gentlemen, for being here. The first question tonight, if you're elected to either a mayor seat or a seat on council, what are your top 3 priorities for the city and why? And we'll start with Mr. Stearns.
Top 3. Well, first of all, I think it's very important that we keep a positive attitude to the city of Meadville. Of course, economical growth is very important, and new businesses downtown. And we've already started that process in the last 17 months. We started with grant programs that allowed new entrepreneurs to start their businesses downtown with support through tax dollars, through the Redevelopment Authority, and jointly with the City of Meadville, $250,000. Second thing would be the slum and blight in the City of Meadville. You want to be proud of your city, and if you would drive up Park Avenue in the last 17 months, 7 houses have been rehabbed, either through construction grants, through Redevelopment Authority, through the City of Meadville, or the neighbors have taken pride and started making a difference. So I encourage you to go up Park Avenue and see that. And of course, continuing to support downtown businesses. It's very important. Meadville's not dead, and we need to keep it positive, and the only way to keep it positive is by taking and being part of it. And the City of Meadville has a slogan, and I really stand behind it. It says, "Meadville starts with me." So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Donahue.
It's an interesting question. I'd steal a little bit from Leroy because we do sit together all the time in our council meetings, and we do hold a lot of the same views. First thing I would say is holding taxes down is my number one thing I look at every time I sit down in the chair. I said we cannot continue to raise taxes to the citizens of Meadville. There's too many people that live on fixed incomes and have no choice. And when we raise the taxes, they have to eliminate something else from their life that they give us the money for. So that's my number one priority. Economic growth, like Leroy said, the Redevelopment Authority is doing wonderful things. And I still would like to see something happen with the Sandy's parking lot building mess that we have down there. And it's the first thing you see when you come through town, and something needs to be done there. But economic growth's important, and that also helps with holding down the taxes, and that's important. And like Leroy said, the slum and blight, we're doing a really good job. I've seen that change since I've got on council. And the other thing I would add in is the brick streets, because that's partly I would consider that slum and blight to me, when you have streets that are so bad you're afraid to drive on them. And that's about where I stand on those things. That's what I see coming.
Okay, Mr. Reedy?
One of the issues that I actually received the endorsement of the Democratic Freedom Caucus for was my position on the land value tax, and that's a tax where you shift the millage from properties, buildings and improvements to the land, and that helps in much the same way as the intention behind raising the homestead exemption. It gets more taxes off of those who have homes. So but I think it's actually a better way. So attacking the tax problem is more than just keeping the taxes down. It's trying to get people who have homes able to keep their homes, and finding more and varied ways to do it. I'd like to, support the municipal cooperation, whether it's through services like fire and police and things like that, because the things that are going on in Vernon Township, I really think that there's some opening there to seeing something there. But and then some forward thinking as far as planning for the long haul. I said it in the primary. The parking garage, for instance, that got torn down because it was never taken care of from the time it was built, and then by the time it was taken care of, it was too expensive to bring up, and it had to be torn down. But the stuff downtown that has amazed me this year. There's so many things that I can't get to everything, supporting that is just you take my breath away.
All right, thank you. Mr. Rowe, you're next.
Only 3? Okay, let's start. We need to explore new funding streams. We cannot continue to rely on taxpayers, property taxpayers, especially because a great number of those people are on limited income. And make no mistake about it, even if you are renting property, you're paying taxes through your rent. So you're still affected directly by property taxes. As time goes on, we need our professional services. We value those services. But with all of the city's departments, we need to develop and explore new service delivery models. It's done in business, it's done in industry. We need to see if we can do it in government. I think we need to work actively with the state legislature. I don't think that the state legislature is working against us, but I don't think it's aware of the problems of local government. Meadville is just one of many communities that could face Act 47. A number of communities in our region have, and sooner or later, virtually every city in Pennsylvania will become an Act 47 community, which is a nice way of saying they're bankrupt because they can't afford to continue to pay for services with dwindling tax bases. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. I would agree with Mr. Rowe that probably our number one concern should be that we have never, since I've been on council 7 years, we have never had a sustainable kind of budget. A lot of the work that goes into the annual budget is one-time fixes on issues. We need to have different kinds of revenue. The biggest source of revenue, of course, in the city is the real estate taxes, and they're higher than anybody else's because we have a lot more services than most townships have. And so I think our number one priority would be to get a sustainable budget that has other sorts of revenue. My second concern is the blight has always been an issue. We have older housing stock. For some reason, one guy in the neighborhood doesn't take care of his property, and it just seems to spread. You know, one house looks bad, and then the rest of the neighborhood doesn't take care of the property values go down. We don't seem to be able to do, we have property maintenance people, but they don't really seem to be able to do much about it. I think a lot has to be done in that area. I'd like to see all these empty buildings. We're making some progress on it. I'd like to see these empty buildings filled up. Like Sean said, Sandy's European Market's been empty for quite a long time. There's a number of buildings downtown. They're nice buildings, but they're just not, they need to be repurposed from what they were built for. The streets, we need a lot of work done on the streets. And my favorite is, I hope that Calamare project happens, because it's been a long time coming, and it's a big thing. It'll be a lot of tax dollars for the city.
Mr. Taggart, we'll have to stop you there. We're go to our second question. We'll start with Mr. Donahue. This kind of dovetails with kind of what we've been talking about. City staff has always been pushing for a countywide reassessment of property values. It's been going on the last few years. Would you support such a reassessment? And if you're on council, how would you work to make a reassessment happen? Because that is a county issue. I mean, it has to be done by Crawford County.
I would love to see reassessment. It's something that I do not think we're ever gonna see. Someone has to pay for it, and I don't see who we're gonna get to pay for it. I know the county doesn't want to, and I don't think the state would pay for it. I like our commissioners that we have now. I work with them very well, and I talk to them. They're very good-hearted people, but I don't know that they could find a way to come up with the answers for this either. I do not see it happening, but I would support it if you could get it to go, but good luck.
I agree with Sean. If I'm not mistaken, our assessment is the second oldest in the state.
In the 60s.
Yeah, so if we could get it reassessed, then the values that are artificially high in comparison and artificially low would actually be based in reality in relative to each other, and it's not like everybody's taxes would go up because their property values would go up. The millage would be adjusted accordingly. So again, like I said, I agree with Sean. It would it's just a matter of money to get the assessment done, and good luck to the county finding it.
I support countywide reassessment. The last reassessment wasn't really a reassessment, it was just a recalculation. And that occurred back in about 1985, where we went from I think a 30% assessed base to a 75% assessed base. And they doubled or tripled the value of properties for market value purposes. That only made the inequities more apparent and larger. I would maintain, having practiced real estate for a long time, that on the average, Meadville's assessed valuation of properties is higher than comparable properties in surrounding municipalities. So a reassessment would address that issue if it's done thoroughly. Costly, yes, last figure I heard was $3 or $4 million to do a reassessment in the county.
Mr. Tagman?
The current structure of our real estate assessment is, I think, more unfair for city residents than other places in the county. I was working on a project in Sadsbury Township. The people bought a house for $350,000, and it was assessed for, I think, $7,000 or $8,000. You know, that's outrageous. If you go around Conneaut Lake, you'll find properties that are selling for $250,000, $350,000, $400,000 that are assessed for less than $20,000. And I see Joe in the audience; he probably is aware of that. But it's really, I've noticed that some of the properties, particularly around Halewood, I noticed it seemed to be. The last time they were actually assessed was in the late 60s, probably 67, 68. And those were the newest houses in the county, actually, and they were assessed at what they were worth at that time. But now they're 50, 60 years older, and they're probably not as valuable as they were then. So I think a lot of the city properties are probably assessed too high compared to the rest of the county.
Thank you. Mr. Stearns?
I'm going to kind of echo what Sean said. In the past, the relationship with the county commissioners and particularly the city hasn't always been on the greatest of terms. But we have that working relationship now. But this doesn't just settle with the city of Meadville. There are 2 cities in the county that has to have the reassessment, along with the townships and the boroughs. I think that we have the opportunity that we could sit down as a team and talk and find a solution to the problem that we all take a part of the share in this. Just not the city of Meadville, the city of Titusville, Verdon Township, Westmead, East Fallowfield. All these townships need to sit down with the county commissioners. And I just have a lot of respect for our commissioners that they would take that time to sit down and talk with us. Would we come up with a solution? You have to start talking first to find the solution. Let's not just put the burden on the city of Meadville. Let's put the burden on the entire county and working with the commissioners to make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that's good. Next question goes to Mr. Reedy first. Property taxes are always an issue in an election year, and this year is no different. City has a millage rate of just under 22 mills. What can council do to hold the line on property taxes or possibly even lower them?
As I had mentioned, one option in order to shift property taxes further away from homeowners is to move towards a land value tax. Most places that move to a land value tax do so at a ratio of 6-to-1, which means that the millage of the land is a ratio of 6-to-1 to that of the property, of the buildings and the improvements. Some places actually go to only taxing the land value. What that does is you're only taxing the piece of the community that that person is living on as a rent of being a member of that community. You're not taxing the buildings and the improvements that they make to their home. So if they have a small piece of land with a modest home, they can redo their garage, they can add on a room, and it's not going to add to their property taxes until someday when their land value increases. Similarly, it helps potentially reduce the taxes for multi-unit dwellings, landlords, and I think that looking at a land value tax would really help a majority of the landholders of Meadville.
I've studied land value taxation. I will disagree with Mr. Reedy wholeheartedly on that issue, but tonight is not the night for that debate. The property tax is 22 mills. What are you going to do? Are you going to lay people off? Are you going to cut services? Are you going to bill for services? We are used, as a city, we're used to having services at our command for basically no cost. But let me use an analogy. Unfortunately, in my life, I've had 7 deer hits. I'm fully insured, but I always have to write a check because there's a deductible. So even though I am fully insured, there's a portion that I'm responsible for. Do we need to adopt a model like that, say for Rescue 7 calls? Or do we need to consider whether we can continue Rescue 7 at its current levels? Because we need firefighters, and if they're out on Rescue 7 calls, are they available to fight fires? Thanks.
Thank you.
What was the whole question again?
Currently, the property tax rate is just under 22 mills. What can council do to hold the line on property taxes or even perhaps lower the tax rate?
Well, since I've been on council, we have lowered taxes once and raised taxes once. That's probably the most important thing for the people that are now on city council is to hold the line on taxes. It's going to continue to require cuts in services to maintain that taxation level. I remember when I first started dealing with the city, there were, I think, 5 or 6 people worked in the engineer's office. Now we have 1 clerk and an outside engineer. There were 4 or 5 typists in the city clerk's office. Now we have not even a full-time clerk. We have this shared it with the city manager. But that, over the last 30 or 40 years, I've seen the staff probably go from, I'm not sure exactly, down probably 2/3, maybe half of what it was at one time. And you're going to just have to, if you want to control taxes, which we all do, the only way left is to reduce personnel. And technology has taken care of some of that because, we used to type out documents, and now you just hit a button on the computer and it copies them. So that has saved us a lot of money over the years. But again, you're going to have to see, to maintain the budget that we have, which is not really sustainable, it's going to require fewer and fewer people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stearns. When the microphone gets to you, it's all yours.
Thanks. I want to give our staff a lot of credit because they hold our budget close to the mark as possible and still provide a great service in the city of Meadville. And we have to choose, what type of service do you want? If you want a high-end service, there's a cost. Operating a business, runs anywhere from 10 to 15% cost of each year. That's because of electric going up, gas going up, fuel going up, wages going up that's not controlled by us. And you have those increases. And, you know, we made some tough decisions. We've lowered taxes, we've raised taxes, we've cut jobs, and we continue to provide the service. But you are going to get to a level of what type of service can we truly afford and what can the taxpayers truly afford. There are a lot of different ways to go, I suppose, but you know, when you talk about EMS, yeah, you could probably save some money by cutting EMS, but do we have the coverage? And that's what the citizens have to tell us. We have to hear from you, what kind of service do you want? I'm very proud. We have a good police department. We've got a full-time fire department that protects our businesses and our residents, but that does come at a cost. We've been very fortunate. We haven't had to raise taxes a whole lot, but in any business, you always have that overhead. So there's no quick answer to this, but we just have to keep working towards it. Thank you.
First of all, I'd like to say economic growth is the easy answer for everything. If we see more business in the city of Meadville paying taxes and more landowners that are paying their taxes, that would help pay for services the city has. Healthcare is a big unknown for us when we do our budget. We don't know where it's going to come in every year, and it would be nice if we had a number that went, and that's basically where we're questioning every time, and Leroy's shake his head because he knows we're both sitting here thinking healthcare is going to hit us here in November, and when we start our budget hearings. I have a few answers, though, that the dispatch, currently the police dispatch is a mill of taxes. It's over $150,000. We could move them to 911, and 911 would handle it. It would be a different service than what we have now. Might not save a whole $150,000, but it would make a savings to the city. But it's like you said, it's a service, and we just visited it last year. I don't know, it might be something we should revisit. The third-party billing for the fire department, that's up, could be as much as $60,000. It's something we also visited last year and voted down. I've spoke to a lot of other fire departments, and they all use it. We're just one of the few ones that don't. Basically, we don't charge if you're in an accident in the city. And I'd like to just say that the staff has decreased, and it's always because of technology. And as technology changes, we should get a hold of it and make sure we take full advantage of a chance to lower things. Thank you.
Thank you.
This next question will begin with Mr. Rowe. This kind of dovetails on what we were talking about with the budget coming up for 2018. Now, last year, City Council eliminated filling current, at the time, vacant firefighter positions. Can the fire department withstand any future cuts and still maintain its level of service, in your opinion?
Unless you can develop a new service model, or unless you bill for services, I don't see how they can stand a cut in services and maintain the current level of service to the community. And therein lies the problem. If you hire a fireman, some people think, well, that's $50,000. It's not. A fireman might cost $80,000 with payroll added costs and pension. You're making a commitment to that person for a quarter of a century, and then they have up to 35-year payout for insurance or for pension for themselves and a spouse. If you start doing the math, hiring a fireman is a $3 or $4 million decision over the long haul, all right? It's not fair to have someone uproot their lives, locate to a community, only to tell them there's no money in the budget next year, you're going to be laid off.
Mr. Battaglia?
I'd like to echo some of the things that Jim said, that it's not really realistic to think that we can maintain the same fire department that we have now, or every department actually. But one of the issues we have that drives the cost of the fire department is binding arbitration, which is the way they bargain for salaries and benefits and stuff, and council has no control over it. It goes almost every time, it goes to a neutral arbitrator who makes a decision, and we have to live with it. And it's been, legislature passed that in the 60s, and it probably made some sense for emergency employees, corrections officers, police officers, state police, firemen. But to expect that we can just pay out a settlement every year, every time a contract is bargained, is not realistic. We're probably one of the few cities that did try to maintain a full staff on each shift, but last year we cut it down. And I would, most cities have 2 people on a shift. Most, municipalities have 2 people on a shift. We have 4. If one doesn't show up, we don't get a substitute. We don't get somebody to fill in. So you could have a minimum shift of 3 people now. And I don't see how we can continue any different kind of model. Thank you.
Mr. Stearns?
We have done something different. We've gone to a defined contribution plan, which you may not see the effect today or possibly within 2 or 3 years from now. But in the future, we will be seeing a difference in a savings. That's one step we've already made. 2 of our departments or unions have accepted that. And again, you may not see it right now, but we're working to the future. We're going to stay out of Act 42, not under my watch. And so we have taken those steps. And as John has said, we're in the middle of an arbitration. It's been 17 months, and we're waiting for the results coming back from that. We have no idea of how that arbitration is going to come out. And with our budget coming up in November, we have to plan on either, usually if there's an increase, we have to plan for that already. But we also have to go back 17 months and bring it up to speed. So we need to get the arbitration through, but we need our staff members and employees to work with the city to keep the service that you're expecting, the level we're at, and we need to work together to do that. And they're correct. We do have to look at different ways to providing some different services.
May I ask you to repeat that one, Rick? I'm getting lost.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that was
I'm sorry. We're talking about the budget, and
Okay.
18's coming up. City last year eliminated the at that time, vacant current firefighter positions. You eliminated the staffing. The question is, can the fire department withstand any future cuts and still maintain its level of service, in your opinion?
Absolutely not. We cannot have any more future cuts and maintain this service that we have now. If you would want to, it's like Jim said, he's absolutely right. With the model we have now, we could not reduce it. Actually, we have to hire a few firemen, is the way I see it. And we're just waiting on some arbitration. I don't know exactly how it all works. It doesn't, arbitration, this is my first time through. John's been through it many times, and so has Leroy. And, but no, we cannot maintain this model, so.
Ready?
I think it's obvious. You cannot make any further cuts and maintain the service. The whole idea behind the 2 in, 2 out is that you have 2 people going into an active burning building, and you must have at least 1 person on the radio in case they call out for backup. And that way, the other person might be working the hose or doing something else. And if you only have 3 people, that person might not be on the radio. So if you cut it down to 2, then you have to wait for at least that 3rd person to be on the radio, and you end up being working like a VFD or a borough. So we might as well just, I mean, if we start making severe cuts enough to our services, we might as well just reorganize as a borough at that point. And yes, our tax base is being asked to support a city level of service here. So it's questions that the voters have to decide. Do you want it or not? Come to city council and express your decision. Email me, herb@outlook.com. Text me, 795-9597. You know, they all have their email addresses on the website. Email them. You know, make your voices heard.
All right, thank you. The next question will go to Mr. Battaglia, and we'll continue the fire department conversation a little bit more here. It was mentioned earlier about third-party billing. Do you support third-party billing, and should the city actively pursue that in the upcoming year?
Yes. In a word, Councilman Donahue and I were the only ones that supported that third-party billing for fire departments in the last round. I think the other three councilmen had some concerns about unfair practices that might happen. I did not have that concern. I think it doesn't make a huge dent, but I think that it's the same analogy that Jim Rowe used. That you know, you have to have sort of a deductible. You know, if you have an accident in your car, a fire truck comes, you know, and they use, you know, that foam stuff to, if there's fuel spilled, and that's expensive, and they use things to soak up the fuel, and those are expensive, and they have some pretty exotic equipment if you have to take the car apart. But I think that insurance companies, if they're properly billed, generally pay for these things, and I'd like to see that put in place. I think it was like $60,000, $70,000. That's $500,000, you know, that you could use for something else.
Thank you. Mr. Stearns.
As John has said, I was one of the council members who voted against it, and I'll explain the reason why. I do want to correct one number, and in all respect with my colleague, is the saving was only $20,000, not $60,000 when you got into the actual numbers and the cost of service. But the issue was, and my concern was, and still is my concern, is that double billing and overbilling. If you're going to have a third-part billing, what is your tax dollars paying for when you have an ambulance or the fire department respond to your residence? If you have the third-part billing, you're paying for a service that your taxes are already paying for. That's my thought on it. And I want to be very careful of that, because we put it into a third-part billing. We have no control over that. You say you do, but you don't. They're the ones who send out the bills. And if you're paying the tax dollars on your property, again, if that's a service that you want to pay with your taxes, then I don't think the third-part billing is the right way to go, at least until we know for a fact that it won't be overbilled on the billing.
I was for this, and John agreed with me. It could be up to $60,000. $20,000 was the low end on this, okay? And I did a lot of work on this, okay? The police, the fire department does not, currently in the city, we do not charge any, we don't bill for our services when they come to an accident, like a car wreck, okay? So if it happened on Baldwin Street, where it's a small stretch of that belongs to Westmead, you could be in a wreck in front of Tedesco's or in front of Leroy's house, and that would be, the city would not bill your insurance company. But a block down the street, the Westmead would come and they would bill your insurance company. Now, I spoke to the insurance agents, and they said this is built into their policies. This is not going to make your policy go up. The accident's going to make your policy go up, not that you're being charged. I would love to see us bring this again in front of the people and let us, because I think this is a way, every dollar really counts in the city, and it's hard to come by money, and between $20,000 and $60,000, I think it's money that we should be collecting now.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Reedy?
I think given that the fire is one of the places where our budget is hurting, and the fact that the township is already doing this and municipalities around us are doing this, that it seems like a reasonable thing to do. I agree that we should look carefully at the taxpayers not being billed for something that they're paying taxes for already, but I think that if we can generate some revenue towards paying for the ever-increasing cost of the fire service, that third-party billing should be done. It seems like money that we're just not collecting.
The short answer is yes, we should be engaged in third-party billing for the fire department. The reason why is that 55% of the assessed base of this community pays 100% of the cost of the fire department. And we have no choice other than to raise taxes unless we find alternate sources of revenue. So third-party billing for fire department services, at least a certain portion of them, is a viable means of continuing.
Are we still
Yeah,
missing?
we're
All right, we're on to the next question.
Mr. Stearns.
Oh, Stearns.
Back down to
Back
Mr.
this
Stearns.
way.
Goes back this way.
Play musical microphone there.
Hey, this is getting a lot of miles on it.
Currently, the city of Meadville seems caught between a rock and a hard place with regard to Tamarack Lake's rehabilitation and the Rainbow Lake Dam. Just a few days ago, council was notified that it had to make a decision, and on October 18th, council would be set to act on a resolution to approve a memorandum of understanding between the city, Natural Resources Conservation Service, and the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission. For work to proceed immediately, NRCS has to release its interests in Tamarack so that its dams may be built to state standards. Meanwhile, for almost 5 years, Meadville officials have been working with NRCS toward the rehabilitation of Rainbow Lake Dam, according to federal requirements. If the memorandum of understanding is approved by council, construction on the Tamarack Lake rehabilitation project would likely proceed immediately. If it's voted down, Tamarack could remain empty for an unknown period of time. That's a long, roundabout way of asking the question, what's your position and why?
Well, first of all, I think all of us that are on council were pretty shocked when we got the message that morning that we may be looking at possibly anywhere from twice to 3 times the amount of what it was going to take to repair Rainbow Dam, up to the $3 million. First of all, we want the community safe. That's number one. 2, I always feel that you can sit down and you can work out issues. And in this case, I think if we can get the USDA and the Fish and Boat Commission with the waivers, we can sit down and we can come to a conclusion that Rainbow Tamarack will be built, City of Meadville will be safe, and there'll be funding down the road from USDA to do the repair work on Rainbow Lake. The problem that happened is somebody got the cart before the horse, and they went out and got the funding without knowing that the City of Meadville had to give their blessing on it because of Rainbow Dam and the construction on it. But I'm very confident that council will be sitting down and we'll be working a solution out.
First, I'd like to say that the people that aren't on council aren't going to get to decide. It has to be decided this month for this to happen. Our next meeting is a very critical one for the rehabilitation of Tamarack Lake. If we say no, I bet you it's going to be 5 to 7 years. Everything I've read says 5 to 7 years before it would come back up. It was built, Tamarack was built because they used to have a flooding problem in the city in the 60s, in the 50s, in late 50s, and they built Rainbow Dam for the same purpose. It was before I was born, so I don't remember any of that. So, and we've never seen a flood that I remember that I would attribute to the Tamarack. We really have no choice in this. If we don't do this and let Tamarack off the federal release them on this MOU, then we're gonna just have to build Tamarack, we're gonna have to build Rainbow Dam to a higher standard anyway, and it's gonna possibly be even more than if we let Tamarack go at a lower standard, which is the state standard. They have $12 million ready to go, and they're gonna start next month, and I'm looking forward to fishing in that lake again myself and taking my kids, and maybe someday they can take their kids, like my father took me. So I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, Mr. Reedy?
As Sean said, I likely wouldn't be on council before this is decided, because it's going to be decided at the next meeting. But both of us were there at that meeting, so that's as much time as they've had to have that decision. I saw a whole bunch of engineers in that room, both federal and state engineers, and they were there in force to convince the council that the state standards and the federal standards are equal, if different. The effect was that the Rainbow Dam would potentially cost more because the federal standards would have to be it would cost more because the federal standards weren't met at Tamarack. But I would think that allowing the waiver would make sense, because if they don't build Tamarack and something needs to be done at Rainbow, it's going to cost more anyway because Tamarack isn't there. So, as Leroy said at the meeting, in a punny way, it's you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, which I love that line. So I think it makes sense to allow it and get the lake filled and get it done and get her done.
Okay, let's get something straight. The reason that there were $750,000 worth of engineering talent at that meeting is because the state screwed up and did not design Tamarack to the federal standard. Now they're trying to make the city the bad guy by forcing the issue with almost no advance warning. They referred to a 1962 agreement. I guess my initial question is, what's in the agreement? Did we accept ownership without any conditions, or did we accept ownership subject to certain conditions? And if the state and feds have not met those conditions, should we even be considering signing a waiver? How much is it going to cost to sign a waiver? I empathize with the people surrounding Tamarack and with properties in that area, and I am worried about flood control, but I resent the fact that the state and the feds are trying to make Meadville the bad guy for their shortcoming. And if 540-acre lake fails, I don't see how a 4-acre lake, that being Rainbow Lake, is going to hold back any flood waters.
Well, I did a lot of homework on this issue when we found out about it. The Rainbow Lake Dam was never intended to protect the city properties from Mill Run. The dam was designed as part of a 3-dam project. Tamarack Lake has a south dam and a north dam. These are meant to control the watershed that feeds into Little Sugar Creek and heads down towards Cockerton. The part that Tamarack actually has 2 watersheds, Mud Run going south, Mill Run going north. Mill Run is not big enough to ever flood the city. The only reason Rainbow Dam is there is because Tamarack is there. And there you got 640 acres of water, 10 feet deep, like 7,000 acre feet of water that could potentially flood into Meadville. But it's also, Rainbow Dam also would control any excess water that would be in the Tamarack watershed there. But anyway, that being said, this would take a lot more than a couple of minutes for me to tell you all that I know about this. It's really been, I don't know, frustrating to have the Fish and Boat Commission drop this on the city council at the last minute. And Jim is exactly right, it's not fair.
Mr. Donahue, we're with you on this question. State Public Utility Commission recently issued a ruling that Meadville, Vernon Township, West Mead all have to furnish the material and perform all the year-round sidewalk maintenance on the Smock Bridge. How should the city handle its share of the winter maintenance for the Smock Bridge sidewalk?
I believe we're gonna run a bus, a cat bus across there instead of, if people want to get across, they can catch a cat bus, is how I understood it. And, we're not gonna maintain the bridge, the walkway, and keep it shoveled off, because I really don't know how you could ever do it. And, that was how I understood it to be. And I think that we're gonna do a shared cost with Vernon and Westmead. And everybody's shaking his head, so I must be paying attention. All right, and that's about how we're gonna do that.
Mr. Reedy?
Sounds like a reasonable plan.
Again, I can't believe they paid somebody for that design of the bridge.
Right.
Why isn't there a wall to protect sidewalk pedestrians from snow, from cars, from everything else? I think the catbus is probably the best solution, although I don't know that they run 24 hours a day. And so for people who are working odd hours, that would be an issue.
Since 1954, when the bridge was first built, that was always PennDOT's responsibility. Because it crosses over a railroad track, the Pennsylvania Public Utilities Commission governs the use of sidewalks there now. My first thought was that we ought to do the same maintenance that PennDOT has done for the last 60, 70 years, which is none. You know, so, but that's really not reasonable. We have citizens that have to get on the other side. Now, when the trail system is built that we're working on now, they can go around that way and over the Mercer Street Bridge. But I think the most realistic thing is to use the catabuses, which, by the way, the administrative law judge that wrote this opinion didn't want done. He wanted Meadville employees, Public Works employees, to go out on that bridge and shovel that snow off with cars coming across the bridge 60, 70 miles an hour, huge plow trucks that are going to put the snow right back on the sidewalk when you're done. It's just the most unreasonable plan I've ever seen. That's all.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Leroy.
No, it's a sidewalk to nowhere. I was on the committee and met with Westmead and Vernon Township. We met a number of different meetings, and we talked about the bridge. And there are a lot of people that use the bridge to get back and forth that doesn't have the opportunity to drive. And the way it was designed is really not beneficial to the pedestrian when they're walking across in the wintertime. There is no barrier, as has been stated. The snow can fly up, cars can slide up over a 6-inch curb. So when we talked about it, it did come up with the idea of using the catbus during the winter months, picking it up down at Taco Bell and taking it over, and I believe we're not charging for that, if I remember that correctly, to make it safe for the pedestrians to get across that. But it was kind of strange the way it was designed, that you put in the sidewalk all the way over and handicapped accessible, and when you get on the other side of the bridge, it goes into a right-of-way of gravel that is not plowed. I'm not an engineer, thank goodness, but we are going to provide the transportation by CATA to help those individuals to get across the bridge during the winter months. And the second thing is, where do you put the snow that you take off the bridge? You're not allowed to throw it over the bridge. You can't throw it out in the road. So that means you're going to be tying up traffic with backhoes and trucks to empty the sidewalk. A good example, take a walk over Spring Street during the winter.
Okay, next question goes to Mr. Reedy. In the past 12 to 18 months, there have been a number of community initiatives to spring up in the Meadville area to improve the quality of life here in the city. How can council support some of those initiatives going forward?
I know the stuff like Meadville Calendar and Jason and Dan and boy, I can't remember everybody's name off the top of my head, but how council can support them. other than getting their name out there and being there for all their events, I honestly don't know, other than giving them some of their walking around money that I
Yes.
didn't know that they had until last week. But this past 18 months, just like you said, 18 months ago when I decided to run for council, I wanted more stuff going on in the city, and they just came out of nowhere and was already thinking about it and doing it. And all the things that I was thinking about, wishing that there was more stuff for kids to do, and then the gaming places getting expanded and all these other things, and the catwalk and the second Saturdays, and I don't know how to push it. I'd have to ask them to tell me how to push it, and I'd have to ask council. I'll admit, I don't know how to push initiatives very well. I was mayor of a small town, so of 3,000, and we had a little recreational program that it'd get me on council, and I'll read up and I'll learn. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Obviously, council should supply all the moral support they can for these projects. If they can help reduce some barriers, that's fine too. But then we come to money. Every dollar that we devote to these projects is a dollar that doesn't go to hiring a fireman or a policeman or buying a fire truck or refinishing streets. So should these initiatives be funded by donations from the private sector as opposed to taxes? That's about it.
All right, thank you.
Almost every time one of these initiatives comes up, it somehow finds its way to council, and not only do we give them moral support, but in many instances when we have parades and 5K races and things like that, that our public works people are out there setting up barricades and setting up the park. We have the muster in the park and on, what is that, Labor Day, and we always let them use the diamond, and they have campfires and stuff, which is of course not permitted anywhere, but council has cooperated with these groups to provide a valuable thing for the city, because again, the idea is to make the city interesting and fun and have events that people are interested in coming downtown and doing. And it's really nice to see these things going on. I mean, for years, it was a pretty dreary place to live, and it's kind of nice now, so we do what we can. Thank you.
First of all, I want to point out the group of people that's made a lot of things happen in downtown are sitting right over there. And how can we help? Get involved. I've been hit with toilet paper coming off a leaf blower at 200 miles an hour, which is not the greatest of fun, but sure brought a lot of laughs. Allowing them to do things that we haven't let them do before. One is we took the chain down from the gazebo so it can be used by the public. The young man came and said, listen, we're going to do a Winterfest in the Diamond. He said, what do you think? And I said, boy, we're going to have to buy a whole lot of grass seed in the spring. But it was worth it because it was a great turnout. It brought people downtown. It got people excited. People started shopping. They started moving down Chestnut Street. We have First Fridays, Second Saturdays, Thankful Thursday. These are the volunteers, the Greener, Grow Greener. First time I ever became a planter, and I planted tomatoes. Lot of fun, but you got to get involved. You got to support them. Cut the red tape. You know, if they need permits, you work with them on permits. But they're not the only ones. We have a great asset. It's called the APs. These are volunteers that go out and stand on the street corners no matter what the weather is, and they don't cost the city hardly any money at all, and they're proud to do it, and they save us thousands of dollars in overtime with our police and fire. So we need to appreciate it. Get involved in your city, support it.
I'd just like to say, since I got involved with council, I found out there were lots of groups of people that were interested in pushing these community involvement for other people, and people do realize that you know your neighbors. It makes your life so much nicer. And but they seem to have, they were all going in different directions, and they've seemed to have all found a common purpose. And on Thursday nights, there's music in the park during the summer. There's Second Saturday on Saturdays. I attend everything I can. I think it's important that someone from council goes. I bring a cotton candy machine, Dan knows that, and kids love me. They don't vote, but someday they will. And I don't know that their parents love it, but, but it's a nice thing to hand out. I just give it away for free. It's just a nice thing to do, and I see a lot of things going on downtown. The music on Saturdays, on Second Saturday, the Saturday night music, it's terrific. I've gone to every one, I think it is, and I like it better on the ground and up on the third floor of the parking lot, but, you know, and it's been a lot of fun. I'm glad to be involved, and I'm glad to see things going on like it is. And one other thing, though, since I got another second, my Meadville is this Thursday here at the Lou Davies Center. It's a really nice event. I'll be here. It's from 5 to 8, and I think they're going to provide some kind of food. There's going to be a dinner, and it's a real community thing, and I had a lot of fun at the last one.
At the Vernon Township Forum, I don't know if any of you gentlemen saw it, it came up that those running for supervisor in Vernon Township were interested in having Vernon Township have a seat on the Meadville Area Water Authority. Now, council appoints members to the Meadville Area Water Authority, but Vernon, because it's a large customer, those candidates said they were interested in exploring possibility of getting a seat on that because of Vernon being a large customer. Mr. Roa, wondered what your thoughts were about allowing the largest customer to have a seat on that water authority.
My memory is that we used to have 7 members on the water authority. I don't recall if any were from Vernon Township. I seem to recall that some were from West Mead Township. I would not necessarily have a problem with having representatives from those townships on the water authority. But I guess we'd be concerned, is it advisory or would it be a voting membership?
They were talking about at least having a voting member so they would have some say, obviously not a majority. But
Something that's worth discussing.
My initial thought would be, no, I don't like that idea. The water system was developed by the city of Meadville. It started out as a private corporation 120 years ago, 30 years ago. Council bought it around the turn of the century because it made money. And it was an alternate source of revenue. Most of the investment in the infrastructure of the water authority was done by city residents. Now we have customers in Woodcock Township, Westmead Township, Vernon Township, and as an advisory, in an advisory capacity, I think it's worth talking about. But I don't think I'd want to have a voting member that didn't live in the city.
thank you. Mr. Stearns?
Well, that's a different concept. I'm going to agree with John on this. I mean, I'd have to really sit down and look at the process, if they are going to be an advisory or, I'm just not sure. I mean, it's a concept to look at, but I think you would almost have to open up to Woodcock and Westmead, because they are also a customer of ours. And where does that stop? it'd be something to look at. I'm not going to say I'm against it, but I need to know more facts on it. It just want to make sure that they're all, would be equally opportunity for each one of them that are a customer.
I'd have to agree with Leroy and John. I'm not sure. I'd be interested in looking into it. As far as, like you said about like Westmead and Woodcock would also be, maybe they should have it. You could almost say Allegheny or Westbury or the hospital could have a vote on our, because of, considering they use a lot more water than I do. Or any of the people on the board. It's just, I'd be interested to talk to them. I'd like to see us be a good neighbors to each other, and something that was important to them, I think should also be important to us, so.
Mr. Reedy?
I think ethically and morally, you can see their argument because the board, or the authority rather, is unelected and makes decisions for their citizens, for their water. But on the other hand, it's a Meadville thing, and I believe that they attach to the water authority. So if you went back years and years and years, the idea of those properties that attach to the Meadville municipal system, you could also argue should just be annexed into Meadville. So that could go both ways. So I don't think it would probably fly.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question goes to Mr. Battaglia.
Okay.
People in Meadville repeatedly say they want good-paying jobs in this area. What work have you done to help meet this, and what steps will you prioritize in the future if elected?
Oh, good question. Everybody wants good-paying jobs, and as I travel around, almost every business has a sign up, "Help Wanted." You know, I don't know, they're probably not necessarily good-paying jobs, but they're jobs. And in my business, in construction business all over the country, there's not enough people. I think that in Meadville, it looks like the problem is that there aren't enough people to fill jobs that we have. The idea that you're going to have some multinational corporation come in and set up a plant here and pay everybody $25, $30 an hour is not even realistic. The good paying jobs are in the machining industry, the tool and die industry, and they go to people that are well trained. And when you have well trained people that you know, made the effort to get their education and their training, then they have good jobs. You know, the day that where you could just walk out of high school and get a manufacturing job are long gone. You know, if the good jobs, it's probably not council's responsibility to get you trained to have a good job. Thank you.
To answer that question, you really can't go out and tell a business how to pay somebody and how many people that they work for. Council really doesn't have that, but what we can do is think outside of the box. And it doesn't fit everyone, but with the entrepreneurial grant program that we just started with the RDA, with the grant money that was given from the city of Meadville, 22 applicants applied for the grant up to $10,000, and 5 were going to be selected. So what council has done is actually tried to encourage individuals to start their own businesses, which then increases retail businesses downtown, which means more jobs. Again, you can't control what the workforce is going to pay, but in this case, we took $50,000 and we had 22 people, 22 that wanted to start a new business downtown or expand a business, but didn't have the finances quite to do it. And council went out and said, okay, we're going to take some money, give it to RDA, and we're going to allow this to take place. And I hope that we have an opportunity to add another $50,000 to it and bring 5 more of those people back in and encourage them. And while I'm doing that, I want to thank Tom Cholak. Tom has done a phenomenal job on this, along with the committee that he worked with to interview these, along with the downtown coordinator. And just want to thank him for that time that he donated to do that. And the response has been great. Thank you.
Leroy was reading my mind, and I would like to thank Tom Cholak. I would just tell people that even if you weren't interested in getting that loan, he could help you learn how to set up your business. And he's an expert at this, and this is what he's retired now, but he's really good at this, and people should find him. Come to our redevelopment authority. I would like to say that what council can do to help is create a good environment for businesses by holding taxes down. The taxes, if they keep going up, people are just going to keep moving away from the city. And to continue, we have to have a safe environment for its employees. That would be the police and the fire department. So it's a catch-22. It's how do we do all this? And we seem to do a good job. I think we're continuing to give a city a safe place, make the city safe.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. People in Meadville repeatedly have said that they want good paying jobs in the area. What work have you done to help meet this need, and what steps will you prioritize in the future if you're elected?
Well, as someone who fills out a timesheet for 40 hours a week, I haven't really employed anybody myself. As far as mayor, when I was mayor, one thing that I ran on was making sure that we had a full complement of fire and police coverage. But in the city here, one thing that I think that we need to do is make sure that people are coming in town, rather than going out to Walmart or to Save-A-Lot or somewhere else like that. And one of the affordable ways to do that, to try to get even more people to stay downtown on Chestnut, on North Street, on Park Avenue, I think, and it's really tricky because the laws are really negative because of the cable industry, is something like municipal Wi-Fi going from North and Main to Arch and Water. Just put up repeaters see if you can get the library to let you set up repeaters to put up a blanket for a few blocks. But just to drag those kids downtown to go to the new clothing shop and eat at E Street and keep them in town a little longer. I know that doesn't get jobs, but it keeps money in the...
Council doesn't develop jobs. Governments don't develop jobs. If anything, governments retard the development of jobs. We can give away land, but every city, county, and every state has land they're trying to give away to a factory that's never going to come to their area. The best thing we can do individually is to give the advice that I give my granddaughter on a regular basis. Develop a skill, gain a certification, complete an education. Research the market and get trained in the areas where there are likely to be opportunities now and in your working career. In terms of developing the jobs base here, most jobs are here because their founders came from here. So if we recognize the spark of inventiveness and ingenuity, we need to encourage that. And the program that Mr. Cholak has been involved with is a prime example of a success story along those areas.
Thank you very much. Well, we're getting to that point now. We're going to conclude the questioning for the evening, and we're going to give each candidate up to 2 minutes to make a closing statement. Mr. Battaglia, we're going to go in reverse order from what we started, so we will start with you first, and then just work our way back down through Mr. Rowe, Mr. Reedy, Donahue, down to Mr. Stearns. but we'll get the last word over here. So, Mr. Battaglia, you have 2 minutes for a closing statement.
Well, I don't need that long, but I've lived here all my life and I've enjoyed it all my life. I've been on council for 7 years now. It's been an honor and a privilege to serve on council, and it would be my honor and my privilege to serve as your mayor. Thank you.
Once again, to everybody who organized this event, broadcast it, and took the time to attend this forum or listen to it on TV and radio, thank you. I'd like to just share a couple thoughts with you. Meadville's fortunate because we have a council manager form of government. It's professionally managed, we have conscientious employees, and you as citizens benefit from that. This evening, when I was brushing my teeth on the way here, I looked at my water faucet and I realized it's not partisan. It doesn't say Republican or Democrat. It says hot and cold. I don't have liberal street lights on my street or conservative street lights. And the snowplows are not left wing or right wing, okay? They plow the city streets without regard to politics. Our department heads are promoted based on qualifications, not on which candidate they backed in an election. Other cities can't say that. Now, as candidates, we're a minor part of the electoral process. You, the voters, you're the important part. In fact, you are the essential part of the political process. Local elections are often viewed as insignificant. Nothing's further from the truth. In a town like Meadville, where the average per capita income is about $16,000 a year, your city, county, school taxes, wage taxes, per capita taxes, cable franchise taxes, and all the other local taxes actually take a bigger bite out of your paycheck than all of your state and federal taxes, including Social Security. So on November 7th, you have an opportunity to cast your ballot for the candidates of your choice. You can vote on a single issue. That's your right. You can base your vote on all the issues which confront us and will continue to confront us. So I urge you, exercise your right to vote for the candidates of your choice on November 7th. After all, that right is yours. It's free of charge, thanks to countless lives spent in fighting for them.
Thank you.
Mr. Reedy?
I'd like to thank Keith, Rick, Armstrong, Cool 101, the Tribune, and Active Aging for hosting this forum. I'd like to remind everyone exactly what I'm running for. Councilmember Langley has decided to not seek another term and has been a persistent presence on council. Sean is running for re-election and will likely win. I'm the only new choice for council this year. The voters of Meadville has given Jim Roja 2 separate chances on council, and each time the voters of Meadville, every time that they were given the chance to re-elect him, they've rejected him. They chose someone else. Don't get fooled again. If you want someone who will be prepared and be knowledgeable or get knowledgeable about the subjects at hand and be willing and capable to interpret the information and discussions being made, vote for Herb Reedy. If you want someone who doesn't have to empathize with people living paycheck to paycheck because they live it, vote for Herb Reedy. If you want somebody who wants to attack the taxes and keep our fire and police coverage first in mind, vote for Herb Reedy. Thank you.
Mr. Donahue?
I would just like to thank the Tribune and Armstrong and Cool 101 once again. This is a lot of fun. I'd like to thank the other candidates too. I love hearing your input, and I can't vote for all of you, but if I could, I would. What's important to me is we've got to hold the taxes down in the city. I've said it from the beginning. Too many people live on fixed incomes in this town, and they cannot continue to watch our tax base go up. I think it's over 50% are owned by rentals, our rentals properties, and it's getting worse. We really have to watch our money, and that's the way I look at it. I watch it in my own house, and I watch it for the city. I said, the budget's coming up real soon, and I'm worried about where it's gonna go, but I'm sure we'll all work together and we'll get through it. I'd appreciate your support again. I had you 4 years ago, and I hope I haven't lost you yet. I'd like to return to council next spring or in January.
I'm going to echo Sean on the Meadville Tribune. Thank you so much for your time and effort in doing this. Cool 101 and also Armstrong. I've had the great opportunity, as I said before, I've served 5 terms on city council, will be at the end of the year, and that's a great honor. And I'm asking for another term, another 4 years, but this is as mayor. And in the last 17 months, you've heard council, or you've heard the panel say they've seen changes. Those changes came from leadership. Leadership comes with working with individuals, listening to what they have to say, working with whoever's on council, whether it's Democrat or Republican, because once you take that office, you're there to represent everybody equally and fairly. And you know, we make tough decisions. And I've voted for a tax increase. I've also voted for no tax increase. And I voted to lower your taxes. We'll do the very best we can to keep the taxes as low as we can. We'll do the very best we can to give you the service that you expect. But we have to find what that level's going to be. And I just want to leave you with this. Meadville does start with me. And it's very important that we all get together and work together. You've seen a difference in 17 months in downtown. It takes a lot of team effort and a lot of leadership. And I hope I can continue to be your mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here tonight, all 5 of you. Now, tonight's forum will be shown on Armstrong's cable channel 23 and channel 100 starting Saturday, October the 14th at 3:30 in the afternoon, we've been told. And that's going to be the first of several repeats of tonight's event. We do want to remind you, if you haven't registered to vote, or you want to change your address, or you need to change your party affiliation for the November 7th election, that you've only got until tomorrow to do so. Now, registration or changes in registration may be done in person at the Crawford County Voter Services Office at the Crawford County Courthouse up on the Diamond in Meadville. That can be done between 8:30 and 4:30 p.m. Now, it can also be done by mail, provided that application is postmarked by Tuesday, October the 10th. Now, if you'd rather be more modern and do it online, you can do so at the Pennsylvania Department of State's votespa.com website, but that's got to be done by 11:59 p.m. on Tuesday, October the 10th. Once again, we want to thank the candidates Leroy Stearns, Sean Donahue, Herb Reedy, Jim Rowe, and John Battaglia for their willingness to appear this evening and take questions from us. We want to thank you here in the audience for joining us, as well as those at home. And one other quick reminder, we've got 2 other forums coming up. One will be October the 19th, and that's for the Crawford Central candidates. That'll be out at the Vernon Township building in Vernon Township. Our partners Armstrong and Cool 101.7 will be there. And then on October the 25th, we're going on the road up to Sagertown, up to the Sagertown High School for the Pencrest School District School Board candidates. So those will be upcoming. Once again, we want to thank you all for being with us. I'm Keith Gushard from the Meadville Tribune, and on behalf of myself and Rick Green, have a good evening.